Hi, Statesmen. Welcome to the summer class. I'm so excited that you're joining us. So today what we're going to do is we are going to bake a yeast bread. This yeast bread is a very versatile dough, so you can use it for a lot of different things. Today, I think I'm going to use mine for either focaccia or cinnamon rolls. I think my boys are hoping that I use it for cinnamon roll. But no matter what you choose, it's all gonna start out the same. And I'm gonna provide you with links to the other recipes. So you can look in your cabinets and your pantry and figure out what you have in order to change the recipe up. But if you don't have any additional ingredients, this bread will bake up as a perfect loaf of bread as well. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. All right, so for our first step, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and proof our yeast. So whenever we're proofing our yeast, we're like making it alive and making sure that it's going to work. So we know that yeast is a fungus, so it means it's a live living organism, and it's a single one-celled organism. So it has to consume things in order to eat, and whenever it eats, it is going to have byproducts during fermentation, which are carbon dioxide and alcohol. So in order to make it alive and happy and active, what we're gonna do is heat up the milk for about 15 seconds in the microwave. Make sure you're using a microwave safe container such as glass or plastic, or glass is the preferred. And go ahead and pour that heated milk into a bowl. We don't want that liquid to be boiling or scalding or hot because that will kill the yeast. And if it's not warm enough, if you just take it out of the carton and it's cold, it's not going to activate it. And into that, we are going to add, I have my sugar and I have my yeast. So I'm gonna put it in there and I'm going to mix that up. So you might even hear of this as blooming the yeast or activating the yeast. So we're just gonna lightly stir it until that yeast dissolves, and then we're gonna set this aside. This is gonna set aside for about 10 to 15 minutes until it begins to essentially activate and consume that sugar, and we'll know that it's started. You'll see like a light layer of foam on top, there's gonna be bubbles, and you'll be actually able to see the action in that. So for the time being, I'm gonna set that aside, and we'll check back in on that in about 10 minutes. You know, in video time, it'll go fast forward. Okay, so for our next step, what we're gonna do is we're going to mix together our dry ingredients. So in this bowl right now, I have 3 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. You could use bread flour if you want it, but all-purpose flour has the right amount of gluten, and it'll be perfect for the bread that we're gonna make. And we're going to also mix into it the baking powder and the salt. So I'm gonna put that in there, and I am going to mix it all together. I'm gonna use a whisk for this just so that I can make sure that it's mixing together nicely, but a spoon would be just fine as well. You're seeing that I'm not using a stand mixer. You could totally do this all on a stand mixer if you wanted. You would use a paddle attachment, mix it all together. That would be fine. Because I assume that not everybody has my beloved KitchenAid mixer, I'm just gonna do it by hand with bowls instead. So, but if you had the KitchenAid attachment, that would be just fine. So while we are waiting for our yeast to begin consuming that sugar, we are also going to mix together our yogurt. And I use Greek yogurt. If you have plain yogurt, like just a regular yogurt, that's totally fine to use as well. But Greek yogurt's what I had in the fridge. What you don't want to use is flavored yogurt. So if you have strawberry or vanilla or something like that, no go. So just a plain yogurt, and all of you should have received plain yogurt in your bag, in your packet, and that will be plenty. So you're going to add your yogurt, and you're going to add 1 egg. And you're just gonna mix that all together until thoroughly combined. So in a third bowl, just take that and mix well until it comes together. The background noises, y'all, my kids, they're really pleasant. Summer, you know what happens in summer. WWE Raw. Okay, so my yogurt's all mixed together. And at this point, I'm gonna wait until my yeast continues to activate. So I'm going to come back in about 6 or 7 minutes. I already see some action on here. I already see it beginning to foam up, bubble up, and it'll be ready. So we'll check back in a few minutes. All right, guys, so I've waited about 10 minutes and now my yeast has activated, and you can tell that it's doing the job that it needs to do. There is a layer of foam on top, and so that's perfect. It's exactly what I want it to be. What I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna grab my bowl of dry ingredients, and I am going to add the yeast directly to it, scraping out anything extra. Excuse the background, humans. And then I'm also going to add my yogurt mix as well. And I'm just going to use a wooden spoon or a fork or whatever you have at home to go ahead and bring that mixture together. If it seems like it might be a little bit too dry, you can add a little bit extra milk if necessary. I wouldn't add more than a tablespoon at a time, just so that it brings that dough together. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add maybe, let's see. I'm actually gonna try kneading it first. I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of flour right here on my table. Make sure your tabletop is clean and been sanitized beforehand. And I'm gonna dump my dough out, and I'm gonna knead it for just a couple minutes until it begins to form a nice handful of dough. Okay. Notice how I'm just folding it onto itself and working it. What I'm doing right here is I am developing the gluten. I am essentially lining it up. The more kneading, mixing, stirring that you do whenever you're working with breads, the more gluten that you're gonna develop. So gluten is either a friend or a foe. And in this case, it's our friend, because we want it to develop nice, strong gluten so that whenever our bread is rising, it can handle rising and the dough doesn't like essentially give out or collapse. And it'll be the perfect structure for us. Whenever you're making things that are really delicate that we're gonna make later in the week, say cake or pastry, you don't want a lot of gluten development there. Too much gluten development in that case is going to end up with a dough that is tough and chewy. But whenever we're thinking about making a bread, that, you know, workable, not chewy, but like a good structure is something that you want. Okay, I'm gonna do this for a couple more minutes to bring my dough all the way together and make sure that it's nice and smooth and that it has the ideal texture. And then we are going to go ahead and put it into a bowl. The size or bigger of what the dry ingredients was in, and we're gonna let it rise for a couple of minutes. Okay, Devin. All right, so now that my dough is kneaded and it's developed, I'm gonna spray a little bit of oil into the pan. If you have Pam spray, go ahead and use it. If not, take about a teaspoon of vegetable oil. It could be a teaspoon of melted butter, just some kind of fat that you're gonna put in here, and you're gonna turn it. And what we really are just trying to do is prevent it from clinging to the sides too much as it grows and being too sticky. If you have saran wrap, you can cover it with saran wrap. If not, just grab a clean tea towel and throw it over there, and then you're gonna sit it in a warm area and let it rise for about 2 hours. During this time, our dough, and I like using one of these large like measuring bowls here, because I can see right now that it's right at about 2.5 for the dough, and I want it to be at least 6 or 8 by the time it's done rising. So that gives me a visual cue as to how much it has rose over time. And you'll tell that it's nice, and the texture will be completely different. There'll be large air pockets. All right, so back to our bread. After it sat for about 2 hours, you can see that it has doubled in size. Like I said, it started here, but at the 2.5 mark, and now we have got to at least the 8 cups mark. So that's a good indication that it's risen like we had wanted it to. So what we're gonna do is we are going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on our sanitized, disinfected countertop. And we're gonna go ahead and punch our dough down. So whenever I say punch dough, I'm not talking about beating the heck out of this bread. I'm talking about gently wrapping your finger inside of your thumb inside your fingers and pushing down to lightly deflate this bread. If we didn't deflate this and we tried to just bake it, we would have a giant air bubble inside of our dough, and that's not what we want. Because we are using this, I'm gonna go ahead and use this for cinnamon rolls. My boys decided they wanted cinnamon rolls. So I'm gonna use all of this dough at one time. If you are doing the cheesy bread or one of the other recipes, you might be dividing it in half. So make sure you pay close attention to what the recipe says. If you want to just bake it as a loaf, follow the cheesy bread recipes without mixing the cheese in, and then bake off as you can. If you don't have a loaf pan, and you want to make rolls out of this, divide it in half, divide each half into at least 6 pieces, and then you are going to roll them and kind of think like, you know, playing with Play-Doh, right? Use the friction of the table to roll it into balls, and then you'll use that for your rolls. So, okay. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to flatten this out into a rectangle. The reason I like to flatten it out into a rectangle is because that's what shape I want in the end. I ultimately want my dough to be about 16 by 20, so 16 wide, 20 long. So I'm going to go start rolling it out wide first, and then I'm going to, starting from the middle, start rolling it out.